Since 1903, innovative healthcare products have been developed and manufactured at the western end of Dwight Way in Berkeley. Today, Bayer is planning to create one of the world's most innovative biological research and manufacturing facilities on those 46 acres. It's transforming operations by modernizing development labs and production capabilities, while continuing the storied relationship between a company and the community where it operates. At the start of a new decade, Berkeley and Bayer are partners in the future.
Good evening and welcome to this community meeting with Bayer and our team from Berkeley, or at least a few members of our team from Berkeley. My name is Kathy Keck, and I lead the communications function for our operations in Berkeley and for our biotech group. On the screen, what you see right now is just a sense of where we're located in Berkeley. So for those who may not know where we're at, this gives you some bearings on where we are. Jennifer, next slide. Oops. So here's our plan for this evening. We are first and foremost, we're recording this meeting to make sure we're capturing your questions and your feedback. That's really important to us. We will cover a lot of information about Bayer and about what our plans are for the future in Berkeley. And we plan to answer questions and hear your feedback at the end of the session. We're going to try something new, and just like all of you, working virtually and using some of these new technologies is new for us at Bayer too. So we're going to try a period of time, 15 minutes of live Q&A, where you can raise your hand, and as you'll see on the screen, there's a raise your hand button for verbal Q&A, and I'll call on you. You'll be asked to unmute and ask your question or make your comment, and then we'll go to the next person. We'll do that for the first 15 minutes, and then of course we're going to also work on written Q&A. We will answer questions that are submitted in the Q&A button, and again, that's at the lower part of your screen. To make it easy and seamless for us not to miss a question, we're going to ask that you put your questions only in the Q&A. That's where we will look for questions if you're not doing it by holding up your hand. If you just have comments, please put those into the chat feature, because those will be a good historical reference for us as well. And if we've not gotten to all of today's questions by our 7:30 conclusion, we'll be following up with the individuals with responses to their questions in the next 7 to 10 days. Next slide, please. So our agenda, and I'm pleased to have the opportunity to introduce my colleagues. As you know, my name is Kathy Keck. My other colleagues who are here with us today are Drew Johnston, our head of engineering, and he'll talk about the site master plan, as will his colleague, Jessica Hayes, who also works in our engineering team. And then my colleague, Jennifer Cogley, will talk a little bit about the development agreement that we have with the city of Berkeley. But to kick us all off, I'm very pleased to introduce Jens Vogel. He's the Senior Vice President for Biotech at Bayer and the head of our Berkeley site. And with that, Jens, I turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Cassie, and welcome to all of you here on this call today. I would have liked to meet in person, of course, but this is, for the time being, the new normal, virtual. And I have to apologize in advance. I just realized that one of our 3 cats hid under the sofa here, so she might come out at some point and hopefully not be too loud. So let me tell you a little bit about myself. I rejoined Bayer in March, about 2 weeks before we all had to shelter in place. And before I joined or rejoined, I worked for another biotech company, led their manufacturing organization here in the South Bay. And before that, I actually spent 12 years already at Bayer in Berkeley. So I came into this country in 2000, straight to Berkeley, and really fell in love with the community, with the city. And we actually have planned to also move back to Berkeley and for our kids to go to school in Berkeley. But that will have to wait until after the pandemic. Now, Bayer has been in Berkeley for a long time, and we are really part of the community. Many of us live here, and we are really committed to Berkeley and the community. And I'm really proud of the programs that we have in STEM education, uh, including the work that we do with Berkeley community scholars and also with biotech partners. That's very close to my heart because very early in my career, I also was a mentor for some students that we basically brought in through biotech partners and that we worked with, and that at least two of them are now working in permanent positions in Berkeley. I'm very proud of the volunteerism of our staff. A lot of our staff is actually helping at the food bank, helping in schools with hands-on science lessons and so on. And I'm also proud of our commitment to environmental excellence. So we have multiple programs. I mean, anything from encouraging biking, transit, and also Bayer globally has actually the goal to reach a net zero carbon footprint by 2030. But let's talk really about what we do in Berkeley specifically. So Berkeley is really our key site for biopharmaceutical development and also for biopharmaceutical manufacturing globally. We are the largest private sector employer in Berkeley with about 1,000 employees. And for many, many years, we've been really focusing on specifically hemophilia, patients with hemophilia. For those of you who don't know hemophilia, it's actually quite a terrible disease. I mean, especially when you look at the history where therapies were not available. It means that patients that are born with hemophilia are missing an essential blood coagulation factor. So that means that if they cut themselves, they bleed and they don't stop bleeding. And more than that, one thing I learned very, very early when I entered that field was that, you know, when you and I go down a flight of stairs, and you know, we might also have from the impact on our joints, tiny bleeds in our joints, but for most of us, these stop right away. But for hemophiliacs, they will continue to bleed into their joints. And ultimately then their body starts to degrade also the joint tissue. And that's why historically hemophiliacs had a very short lifespan, and they also, many of them, because there was just not enough therapy around, many of them ended in wheelchairs and so on. So we tried to change that very early on in the 90s. We were one of the pioneers using biotechnology to produce factor VIII for hemophiliacs. And let me actually introduce you to someone virtually, so to speak. Maybe Jennifer, if you could throw the slide of Evan. So this is one of our patients. His name is Evan. And I had the great pleasure to actually meet him when we celebrated the last World Hemophilia Day. And Evan was born with hemophilia. He was lucky though to basically have access, be able to, because now for many years we are producing these medicines, be able to get our products. And as a result, he has he lives a very, very active lifestyle. And he's actually training as a nurse, working in a hospital now in the middle of the pandemic. And again, very, very impressive young man. And this is really why myself and many of our people and our staff have gone into biotech in the first place, because our therapies really literally can save lives and help people live a perfectly healthy, normal life. And that's really, as you can imagine, why we actually come to work every day. And now we are actually serving patients in about 50 countries. When you see the next slide, this is also something that just shows the pride, because really everybody, all of our employees, from top management down to the operators that are in the trenches making these medicines every day, are really, really proud to be part of that. And supplying these patients globally with these medicines. And I have to say that I'm very proud of the team that, despite the pandemic, we continued uninterrupted supply all throughout, with having around 400 people round the clock working all throughout every day. All right, so let's also talk a bit about the future, really, in our future plans with Berkeley. In Berkeley, we now really want to invest in novel therapies. And you might have heard about gene therapy and cell therapy, that those are really the technologies that will, in our mind, revolutionize medicine. So for the very, very first time, when you think about gene therapy, you can actually think of a curative approach. So really not only helping people to live on or live longer with a disease, but actually being able to cure a disease. And especially for monogenic diseases, this will be revolutionary. Cell therapy is the next revolution, really, that will allow us to treat cancer much better than we ever have. And in many cases also perhaps at least approach a cure. And when you look at the response rates that are achieved with the first generation of cell therapies in hematological cancers, you have response rates of, in some cases, up to 95%. So up to 95% of patients in certain hematological cancers have a long-lasting response. In many cases, their tumors basically completely disappear. So that is what makes us excited. We want to really help bring these therapies to patients. The difficult thing there is that cell and gene therapies, they're not only new, they're still in development. They're also very, very complex and very hard and difficult to make. And that's where we come in, because really our strengths, and we learned that from making factor VIII, the blood coagulation factor I was talking about earlier, because that is really the most complex protein drug ever made. And so we learned the hard way how to really manufacture these difficult to make products. And that requires a lot of innovation and a lot of invest in new technologies. And that's what we really want to do in Berkeley. We want to leverage our know-how in making these complex drugs to bring more of these medicines to patients to treat cancer, cardiovascular disease. Parkinson's is one of our lead programs in cell therapy, and many other devastating diseases. Now, we also plan really to partner with companies. We have very much an open innovation approach already now. About 30% of our drugs at Bayer actually originated through innovation at outside companies or universities that we partnered with. And we want to continue that. And also for that, when you look at innovation, innovation to me really goes hand in hand with diversity, because really diversity in any shape or form gives you diversity of thought. And that is really what innovation is all about. That's what creates innovation. And that's why we really firmly believe that there's no better place in the world to innovate and also to partner with innovative biotech companies, academia, and so on. There's no better place than doing that right here in Berkeley. So the new master plan that we have for Berkeley, we have big plans. The master plan that you will see shortly is really about ensuring that our site here in Berkeley can support those medical innovations that will then lead to those new treatments for cancer and Parkinson's and so on. For that, we need additional product development labs. We need modular manufacturing facilities that we want to create that allow us to flexibly shift between different products for different indications. And we also want to create a space, I was talking about the innovation, a space that encourages people to collaborate. So essentially, we want to create a biotech innovation hub right here in Berkeley. And with that, I would like to hand over to Drew Johnson and Jessica Hayes from our engineering team.
Thanks, Jens. Just a quick mic check. Can everybody hear me? Okay, so you guys not good, great. Well, hello, my name is Drew Johnston. I am responsible for engineering in Berkeley. And maybe Jennifer, you can start showing the slides again. So just a couple things on the master plan. So Jens, as he said, there's a shift in general, not only within Bayer, but in the industry towards specialty medicine, much more targeted therapies that lean towards cure. Now, what that means from our perspective and a physical built environment perspective is that the plants that brought biotech to where it is and where brought Berkeley to where it is are much more product specific. The infrastructure is typically larger and it's built around one main product to, lack of a better term, mass produce that for the population. The future technology that we need has to be much more flexible. So the patients that will receive the medicine will be a smaller group and will be much more targeted towards them. So from our perspective, that means we need facilities that can do smaller quantities and transition between products much easier. So high level of flexibility, which is a different type of infrastructure than we have today. We're actually investing in the first step of that. That's our Cell Culture Technology Center, which is being built in Berkeley right now. And that's the first step. We will never lose our hemophilia roots. That's, again, we built our expertise. We support that patient population, and the infrastructure in Berkeley will never lose that focus. But we're going to evolve our site to meet our future needs. Can we go to the next slide? Jens also mentioned that it's important, the collaboration. So when we talk about, when you think about when a product gets discovered and we understand that this is a product now that can help patients, it has to go through a development process. So come off the lab bench into production type equipment, and that's called process development. From there, you move into the clinic. From the clinic, you move into a commercial launch. Now, those are all very different jobs. They're all related, obviously, but the groups of people that work on those different pieces of the process, the job is different. But having them have a chance to collaborate, there's a lot of power there. The more they understand each other, the more they understand what problems are being solved and being confronted in each of those different phases, they can help each other. And that really speeds the process. So from the idea to the patient, allowing those teams to collaborate speeds that process along. So when we take that into our site development, we want a campus that maximizes that. So we want a campus that maximizes our land, and we have the best use for launching products and for developing products. We want a campus that allows those groups of people to come together. And we also want a campus that, frankly, the community and the employees are proud of. And it fits well with our employees and community. So they're proud of it, and it attracts talent. I'm going to turn over to Jessica Hayes. Her slides are more interesting because they actually show what we plan to do. So Jessica.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. It's true, I do have probably the funnest slides in the whole deck. So I've been with the site about 16 years and primarily in the functions of local site manufacturing as well as global quality. And so about a year ago, this opportunity to get involved in the master planning process and the development agreement presented itself. And it's been a very exciting journey thus far, and pleased that we can share some of this information with you tonight. It's been very cool to see how the West Berkeley corridor has evolved over the years with new businesses and shops. And so even though I think there's some advantages to the format tonight, we get to reach more people potentially, we do miss out a little bit on the in-person dynamic and being able to have a more dynamic exchange with all of you. So now that you know what I look like and what I'm working on, if you see me at the Berkeley Bowl or walking back to site with a mochi muffin, feel free to stop me and chat. That could be a ways in the future with the current global pandemic, but we're looking forward to a time when we can do those things again. So we're oriented looking towards Aquatic Park and the bay with San Francisco in the distance, more or less at the corner of 7th and Dwight. and we have a lot of surface parking. It's not the most optimal way to use our property. It's not aesthetically as pleasing as we'd like it to be, and in a very expensive part of the world, we see an opportunity to use the land in a better, more effective way to support the business objectives that Jens explained. I think we can just go ahead and go right into the next slide, which kind of shows this full 30-year conceptual build out of how we'd like to design the campus to enable some of those priorities that Drew shared. We want to be able to recruit and retain top talent with the tech industry in the Bay Area. There are some very desirable campuses in the greater Bay Area, and we definitely have an opportunity to transform the site from this traditional city grid, which has served us very well for so many years doing the hemophilia business, but having an opportunity now to reshape things. And at the very beginning, we shared a short clip. There's a longer video that will be available on the website to all of you, and there were some time-lapse videos showing some of the construction. And now that we have some land to work with here, we thought, well, what can we do to enhance our presence in the greater community and for the employees who show up every day? Along 7th Street, we're envisioning a little bit more of a greener, expanded entrance corridor. So we could pull our fence back. We have to maintain a boundary around our operation because we have a lot of agencies and good manufacturing practices that need to be maintained. So in terms of security and those types of things, we do need to maintain a secure boundary. But if we pull the fence line back a little bit, we can green around 7th Street, kind of entrance plaza. And then on the inside of the site, you'll also notice expanded green space. This is for a pedestrian priority, for more ease of flow within the campus for employees to collaborate, and various places outdoors in our ideal climate to use the outdoor space for that collaboration. Towards the center of campus where the cursor's going, that would be our core manufacturing zone. So from 7th Street, kind of running parallel with Aquatic Park, all the way down to Grayson Street. Those are the primary north and south boundaries of the site. That would be our manufacturing corridor. And then as we move from Aquatic Park west to the east towards 7th Street, we would envision more biological development, lab space, and administration space. Traveling south down to Carlton Street, south of there, we have an opportunity to expand some administration spaces, as well as some additional parking. Instead of all of the surface parking, we envision having some structured parking available. So while we would like to reduce the number of spots required in coming years through solid transportation demand programming, we do want to ensure and reassure everyone that we do have adequate parking considered for the plan. In terms of building heights, we are not proposing anything taller than our existing development agreement enables us to do, but we are looking to consolidate some of those heights in a central part of the campus, closer towards, yeah, there's the cursor. That section of blue right there would be a very late stage development that we would anticipate closer to year 30. So this isn't all happening at once. The color coding helps explain some of the phasing associated with the plan. The yellow is what we conceptualized by around year 10, and the blue additional by year 30. And with that, I think I will turn it over to Jennifer Cogley to discuss a little bit more about the DA.
I'm the only panelist who gets to talk and move slides around, so that's pretty exciting. My name's Jennifer Cogley. I'm community relations here at Bayer. I worked in economic development in the city of Berkeley for about 14 years before I joined Bayer in the end of 2016. And one of the things I get to do is explain what is a development agreement. What you've seen is our site master plan. That's what we want to do over the next long period of time. And there's a mechanism for a company or any property owner who owns a large parcel and has plans for a phased build out. There is a way to have that plan approved in concept over the long haul. Such a plan was enacted back in 1992. And that plan goes through 2022. What we're doing now is making way for the next 30 years. And what happens is we do an environmental impact report study of all of the things that we hope to do over the long haul. In doing so, we get certainty about what kinds of buildings we can do over the long haul. It means that our approval times are fairly straightforward and avoid some of the long, complicated processes that can sometimes happen in a development environment. What that does so I've explained what it does for us. It makes it easier for us to attract investment. A good reason why we've been able to stay in Berkeley all these years is because of the ability to bring our German investors here and let them know what we can get done in this space. And it also provides a tremendous amount of value to the city of Berkeley. Not only do we pay taxes and do philanthropy in the community, we also have special things that we are required to pay through the previous development agreement. This slide here lays out what those payment categories have been over the last 28 years. We totaled it up, and when you add it all up and adjust for inflation, comes out to over $37 million. You'll see the payment categories. Some of the largest areas of investment are really around biotech education. I think you heard Jens talk a little bit about our Biotech Partners Program. We've also paid for bicycle infrastructure, and now I'm going to see if I can, there we go. I'm now making the slides and the talking happen at the same time. So we have a shuttle program that connects the Ashby BART to our station, to our location. We've also invested in bicycle infrastructure. And I think you saw a picture of some of the very first class of the Biotech Partners Program and the most recent one. What we're going to talk about next is we're going to hand everything over to Drew for a second, and he's going to talk about what we are seeking as we look to extend the development agreement.
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. So just really simply and straightforward, we've shown quite a bit of information. We've talked about a lot of different things, but in the end, what the development agreement means to us in Berkeley is the full build out would add roughly 1,000 jobs. We want to include all of our site, because right now our site's divided basically in two pieces. We have one that's under the current development agreement, and one we bought after that, that is under a use permit. We like to consolidate it so we have one set of development guidelines. We want to simplify our zoning on site. Currently we have multiple zones with multiple different development rights, call it, into 4 simple zones that we can understand very easily as Bayer, and so can the city. And we'd also like to use more of our site as open green space. We say 6+8 acres, could be up to 9 depending on the level of development. And then from, Jen, can you go to the next slide? But what that means is we'd like to extend our current agreement for 30 years. Like Jennifer mentioned, the current agreement we have was signed in 1992, and that has worked very well as described over the years. It has brought us to this date. I don't know whether it's luck or, yeah, it's got to be luck, that the biotech industry and the pharmaceutical industry in general is going through this transition, and the timing lines up very well with our agreement. So good news for us, we can have a reasonable expectation of what our future is. We know what our strategy is, and we have a very good understanding of the infrastructure we need, and we have an inflection point on this agreement. So it's extending it for 30 years makes a lot of sense to us in Berkeley. We want to protect all view corridors. So when you're on the street looking towards the bay, you can see through the site the same way you do today, and not obstruct that at all. And also switching up the way we use the site, we can accomplish all this and not request any additional square feet compared to what we have rights for right now. And we think that means a lot. We'll open up the side of it, use it a bit different, install the type of facilities that we need, but also not be able to add any space, which is important. Now with that, I think I turn it back to Jennifer.
Okay. So these are big plans that we're talking about, and it requires a lot of oversight and review by the community. So this is part of that process. Through Jessica's amazing work, we turned in our application to extend the development agreement. That got turned in, I think it was 2 weeks after the shelter in place. It was quite a flurry. And that was an 88-page application document. Currently, Jessica is helping to provide information for a team of specialists that the City of Berkeley has identified to conduct an environmental impact report. And there will be sessions for scoping at 2 City of Berkeley commissions. The Zoning Adjustment Board will host a scoping session on November 12th. I'm looking at my wall calendar here. And there'll be another one on November 19th. And as well, we're looking at possibly being at the Design Review Committee in December. Once we've received that, once the external consultants get the feedback from the community, they will go and do another round of study, and at some point publish a draft environmental impact report. This is where I get a little sketchy, and Jessica is our resident expert on this portion of the process. Jessica, can you unmute and talk a little bit about what the environmental impact report covers?
Sure, we're doing traffic study, air, noise, aesthetics, and then the scoping meetings will help guide the full list of studies that are required. The city has hired Rincon as the environmental consultant to coordinate all of that.
One thing that's interesting is that the requirements of a environmental impact review have changed a little bit since 1992. Currently, there is now a greenhouse gas assessment that is conducted as part of the environmental impact report. Once that, and what you'll see here is this little brown line. That's us having conversations with you. What you'll see next is at some point along here, you'll find out how to reach us. I think you might have received an email from me with information about this process. I'm a great person to ask questions of. I don't always know the answers, but it's my job to find out who does know the answer and get you connected. And then there will be a planning hearing that is scheduled currently in the 3rd quarter of next year in August. And after that, a planning, and then a council vote also in Q3 of next year. So with that, what we do next, I'm going to put this slide up again while we have questions going. But we wanted to finish with a little bit of a finale. With that, we will show a video of what we conceptually think the site might look like in the future. So, give me a moment. I make that happen. Oh, make it happen.
Thanks, Jennifer. So with that, we're going to give this new approach to a Zoom meeting a try, and take the next 15 minutes, so essentially until 7 o'clock, for anybody who wants to raise their hand and use and express a comment or a question in person. So again, the raise hand button is on the bottom of your screen. Oh, and I see we already have someone. Awesome. Carla, I'm going to enable you to talk, Carla.
Hey, great. Can you hear me?
We can. Thanks
Yep.
for joining us.
Fantastic. Hey, my name's Carla Caravel. I'm a board member of Biotech Partners, and this is super exciting to see all that you all put together. And I'm excited for the next 30 years, and the 30-year partnership we've already had has been fantastic. So thank you for that. Relatedly, like, how do you see this new master plan working out for like the skilled workforce, in the Bay Area and Alameda and Berkeley? What kind of increase do you think will be needed by you all?
So Jens, do you want to talk about our workforce? And I think Drew will probably chime in.
Absolutely, absolutely, Carla. Thank you for the question. No, definitely. Again, we have great plans, and ultimately, we want over the years to double our workforce. So that would basically mean about 1,000 additional jobs that we want to bring to Berkeley. And one of the good things is that, as you know, because we are not only doing science and development, we are also doing manufacturing, and we really believe in that we don't want to outsource manufacturing to Singapore or China. We want to do that high-tech biotech manufacturing here in Berkeley. So it's going to be a real range of different positions for different education levels. So that's our plan. And with regards to Biotech Partners, again, yes, it's a great partnership, and we will look to even trying to expand that further. And as I mentioned earlier, Carla, this is really close to my heart because I've seen firsthand how powerful that is and what positive impact Biotech Partners and this program can have on young people from diverse backgrounds.
Drew, anything to add?
Sure. I mean, that's the greatest part about our business, right? So we're a manufacturing site, and we really have a job for everybody, high school all the way through PhD. If you guys get to know me, you'll hear me say that a lot, but it's true. Like I run engineering. We have PhD engineers on the team, and also very highly skilled technicians that are trained here on the job. So if you're into the biotech, if you're into life sciences, if you like supporting patients, there's a job, and it's great. So.
Great. We now have a few folks with their hands up, which I'm very excited about. So Norm Gold, if you could unmute yourself.
Sure. Hi there. I sent a couple of questions through the Q&A, so I would just, if you could respond to those. First was about, you made a comment that in this build out, you're not going to add any square footage. But does that mean there's no new square footage of building footprints, or does that really mean there's no new square footage of operational space in these buildings?
Drew?
Sure, it's a really good question. So our current entitlement's about 1.8 million square feet, maybe a little more. Our total master planned square footage for what we think we need is about 1.7 million. So over our current entitlements, there's no additional square footage requested. Now, with that said, we do plan on fairly significant construction. I know there's questions about that.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
Which we can answer.
You plan on what? I didn't understand that.
Oh, so our current entitlements are 1.8 million. Our total build out that we project in the master plan is 1.7. So there's no additional square foot requested over our current entitlements. Now, with that said, we do need to add, within that 1.7 million, there's approximately 600,000 square feet of new building that will go on site. We have about 1.1 right now.
Got it. Thank you. Sure. And then my second question was about access by the public. I'm in North Berkeley and enjoy the waterfront and the Bay Trail on a bike and all the rest, but you're talking about green space, but you also said you need security fencing and enclosed space. Does that mean that only employees will have access to the green space you're going to be putting in, or will there be public access to any of it?
Well, I guess it's interesting. To answer your question, a little yes and no. So we do plan to add about an acre and a half, 1.6 acres of green space along 7th Street that is fully accessible to the public and say outside of our fence. Our GMP operations, though, that we will fence that off. So that our site will remain fenced, and that will be for employees and the other folks who work on site.
I can share the screen again if that's helpful, Drew.
I mean, if you'd like, but I mean, that's basically the crux of it. What we would like to do is, if you've been down 7th Street, our fence is fairly close to the street. We plan to pull that back about 60, 70 feet and provide some green space along 7th for public use. I know, I mean, I've worked in Berkeley now for 8 years. And when I depart the Dwight Gate and I want to walk down to 900 Grayson or get something to eat somewhere else in Berkeley, it's a narrow sidewalk that leads you by our site. It'd be much nicer if we had some green space there that got you from one end of the site to the other. And also with green space that's usable, right? Walking by a lawn is one thing, but having green space that you can actually go through is good. So that's our plan. You can see it running along 7th there. That is significantly more space than is outside our fence right now. Our operations, though, internal, those green patches you see inside the site, that'll be part of our campus, and you'll need access to the site to be there.
Thanks, Drew.
I'll just add too, along the western boundary in terms of access, just because I think the aquatic park portion was also mentioned, the railroad tracks run right behind our campus. So in terms of accessibility, that's already blocked off. There's no direct way to connect the campus with that part of.
Yeah, and maybe, sorry, I've got a dog protecting the castle. Also, one of the questions is like, why was this different than Genentech or Gilead, some other pharma companies? The difference is our operations are 100% GMP for the most part, so we control access. We have to protect those operations as just part of our business, and we do that with the gate instead of at the door because we use multiple facilities in each process. So.
And Drew, just for our audience, GMP is good manufacturing processes or practices.
Correct.
Those are required by all of the regulatory authorities around the world for us to be able to provide medicines for people to take at home. So that's quite important. Next question is, I don't know if this is initials or name, so I'm going to apologize. SI or Psy? If you can unmute.
Hi. You can hear me now? Yes?
Yes, we can.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, it's my name is Seema, and I'm an architect and a lighting designer. My question is about how you are approaching the lighting design in the new campus, especially with all of these products and concerns about well-being and healthy lighting. Do you have any information, or you haven't gotten to that point yet?
Do you mean exterior lighting or interior lighting?
I think your project covers interior and exterior both, correct?
Yes, it does, but I think it just would help Jessica and Drew on answering, but I'm going to let them ask any follow-ups and defer on.
So maybe I can start, and Jessica, you can do that. So the lighting levels inside our facilities are driven by our process and our employee needs. So they're designed around that. Our exterior level lighting is designed to control the light pollution to our neighbors. And as part of our environmental reviews, these are all parts of the design that'll be reviewed. So Jessica.
Yeah. You know, the full architectural designs of the buildings that we explained tonight in the master plan, everything we've shown is concept at this point. So there's not a precise level of detail in any one of those buildings, but in general, for in addition to the points Drew mentioned, we would aim to have lighting architecturally integrated with the structures and green initiatives are, of course, a priority. So energy efficiency, shielding for reflectivity, close to aquatic park, of course, would be a priority as well. Those types of things.
I'll jump in. Our lighting design at the office will be way better than our lighting design at home as I look at our screens.
Hopefully.
We're a bunch of engineers, we're not movie stars, so our screens are not the best. So maybe that was what inspired the question.
Okay, and we have two more folks who raised their hands, so we're going to do those two questions, and then we're going to move to the questions that have been submitted in writing in the Q&A. Oops, and one of those people already decided not to talk. So Sarah Zimmerman, if you can unmute yourself.
Yes, hello. I'm Sarah Zimmerman. I'm a community member lived for 15 years or so in the South Berkeley neighborhood. And I'm curious, it seems to me that 7th Street is a pretty busy street and a not very hospitable street for walking down. Whereas I personally, certainly have often taken the route down Dwight Way in order to have use of the bay and sort of get that exposure to our beautiful community that we live in. I wonder whether there's an opportunity to create a walking path down along the west side of the campus so that the community can enjoy those views and kind of enjoy that exposure. Even though they go by the railroad tracks, I still think that would be really greatly appreciated. And similarly, I'm curious whether there's an opportunity to open up any of your building spaces to community groups or community events for uses. And in my questions, I pose a particular example, but I just think generally there's lots and lots of groups that are really working with young people in the community or other things that if there were an opportunity to use some of your space sometimes when you weren't using it would be really deeply appreciated and really create a lot of community goodwill.
So Sarah, thanks for the question. And I think we touched on the railway backup, and we appreciate the comment you have and the feedback. We'll note that for sure. But I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer to talk a little bit about the question on community benefits and sort of how we handle those and what may or may not be feasible.
Well, community benefits are a part of the negotiated portion of the development agreement over and above the mitigations that will arise from the environmental impact report. But engaging with the community is something that we've been thinking about already, and at the risk of passing the buck, I'm going to invite either Drew or Jessica to comment on community space, because I know that's something that was envisioned possibly for some of the development.
Sure.
Just the inside.
Okay, sure. It was a consideration when we did the master planning process in terms of making space available where Bayer could host some community events in terms of speakers, but also it as a possibility. There's been no detailed plan put together, and I think there would be a lot of considerations, but we appreciate the idea, and it has occurred to us as well.
So Sarah, something to consider is if that's something that you think is an important community benefit, I would recommend, one, we'll note this obviously, and this event is being recorded, but I would also encourage you to reach out to David White, who is the Deputy City Manager and the main point of contact for the community benefits negotiation process once that gets started.
Yeah, I'd be really happy to do that. And I'd also just like to say that I don't feel like the question about the access along the west side of the campus was really thoroughly answered. I appreciated your thoughts before about the railroad, which of course impedes the ability to directly access Aquatic Park. But it seems to me that community members still enjoy having views of Aquatic Park, and there are many places where along that region you have views of the bay. So I'd just like to hear whether or not you've considered or thought about the opportunity of opening up some public space along the west side of the campus,
Drew?
which wouldn't, of course, interfere with the sort of security boundary that you described.
Yeah, so I guess it's going to be a little bit of a disappointing answer. So we did consider it, but the amount of Well, there's two things. I think someday when we can allow visitors to come on site, you'd be frankly a little disappointed at the grade level view of the bay from our site. The aquatic park, the trees in aquatic park have grown up and blocked most of it. So one kind of a minor point. But the space it would take to create a true public access and kind of can control that on the backside of our site is too much. It's better for us if we put it out on 7th Street, which allows us to control the backside of the site. That and two of our major anchor facilities are already built and they're not going in anywhere, and they're pretty close. They're within about 40 feet of that back fence. There's really not space back there to allow that path with a railroad and our operations all coming into play.
Since we can't host anyone for a visit, if you are at the far end of Dwight Way or the far end of Grayson Street, you can kind of get a sense of where our operations are vis-a-vis the railroad track. You can see that it's a pretty tight fit right there. And it's hard I was trying to picture how it could work in I-2. It's also, frankly, not that pleasant to be right up against the railroad tracks.
Yeah, I don't want to get all weird about it, but we have to provide for an access for the public. There is public safety requirements on the width of that, and then we have public safety requirements and fire protection requirements on our side of the fence. You stack all of that, it becomes fairly significant.
Okay, thank you. So moving over to many of the questions that still remain in the Q&A. Jens, if you can make sure you're unmuted. Derek Lee has asked a really great question after thanking us for the overview. He wants to talk us to talk a little bit more about talent and workforce, and specifically the types of investment Bayer makes in workforce development at the K through 12 level and also at the college level. So if you could kick that off, and then I have a feeling, Jens, that Jennifer will have some additional thoughts.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, this is very, very close to many of our hearts, actually. And this is something that we want to continue to invest in. So I think I spoke about a few avenues of how we are contributing there earlier, at least try to. So, for example, we do have lots of our employees that actually are volunteering in classrooms for science education. That's one way we can really support STEM education in our schools. We are also working with Berkeley Community Scholars. So that's a really important program to support students who then go also to community college with scholarships and supporting them also with mentorships. And Biotech Partners is another one that again, as I mentioned earlier, is very, very close to my heart. And I've actually early in my career worked with them directly and worked with young students from local high schools to support them, and then community colleges later on. So there's a variety of things we do. We also this year, I think during the pandemic, we supported science kits to be basically distributed at the schools here, 4th and 5th graders in Berkeley Unified School District. And that I think we did through community resources for science, and that they work, I think, with schools throughout the East Bay. So there are several different avenues how we are trying to really support STEM education, K to 12, but also beyond that.
Thanks, Jens. Jennifer, anything to add?
One thing that I think is pretty amazing about what Bayer does around STEM education is it's really practically from cradle to career. There's a number of studies showing the need for very early intervention around numeracy or getting comfortable with concepts of numbers. We have worked with Bananas to ensure that there's a curriculum for home healthcare providers that gets youngsters used to counting things and concepts of sorting, all the way through the kinds of elementary school work that Jens talked about, and through college. Our foundation was really instrumental in helping to expand the Berkeley Community Scholars Program from being just a bachelor's degree support program to one that really helps students leverage our community college system to launch their post-secondary education. So, and frankly, our workforce is very excited about sharing their passion for science. Our workforce is, I think, around 30% white and a large percentage of Asian Americans, 7% African American, and I forget our Latino number, but a significant proportion of Latino and Hispanic employees. So a lot of our employees really take it to heart to volunteer in the schools and mentor in lots of different ways.
Awesome. Okay, next question. Jessica, if you could unmute. There's a question regarding what level of biosafety labs will be permissible?
BSL 1 and 2.
Okay, and those are the same as we have today, correct?
Correct, no change to that.
No change. Awesome. Next, I'd like to go to a question from Sarah Zimmerman on, she says we currently have a fairly contaminated community. What risks might exist for air, water, and other contamination from new or existing facilities? So Jessica, I think you're on for that one as well.
Sure. All of that information will be fully disclosed in the environmental impact report. All the risks are expected to be less than significant, but there will be transparency in that.
Next question is also from Sarah. Curious about plans for protection against sea level rise.
Sure, that'll also be addressed in the environmental impact report.
Okay.
But yeah, but we're 20 feet above sea level, so not anticipating, if at worst case we had a 3 to 4 foot rise, our site's probably still okay.
Okay, great. Drew, I'm going to put this next one to you, if you could unmute. Claudia has asked, she obviously knows about our site. She says much of the sidewalk area outside of our gates is often filled with employees who are taking smoking breaks, making the area inaccessible to the public. Could BEAR include a smoking zone inside our fenced area so the sidewalks would be more accessible to the general public?
That's an excellent question. So as far as inside of our gate, we're a non-smoking site, so it would end up outside our gate. But I do appreciate the comment because we don't have to wait to make sure that we provide a place that's kind of good for everybody, right? So the accessible areas. So we have 3 on site outside of each of our gates. We'll take a look to make sure we're not interfering with the public.
Thanks, Drew. Claudia also asked a second question as a neighbor and member of the Parks and Aquatics Commission, Parks and Waterfront Commission, and concerned about the future manufacturing that borders aquatic park. How would we minimize impacts to aquatic park? So do you want to handle that as well, Drew, or?
Sure, I think the combination of Jessica and I can. There's obviously the view part, which will be part of our aesthetic study as part of the environmental review. There's birds and other things, which we are also addressing through bird safe glass and making sure that our setbacks are correct. I don't know, Jessica, if you wanted to add anything to that.
Yeah, nothing too much further to add. Considerations around noise and all of that is being addressed in the environmental impact report as well as aesthetics. So, and visual simulations will be assessing all of that from the western boundary.
Yeah,
Maybe
just for the sorry, it's just for the general audience. The good news for all of us: we live in California, and the CEQA process, so the California Environmental Quality Act, is really robust, and the reviews that it requires really protect us all. Right? They take a lot of interest, whether it's noise, visuals, light, water, air. We look at a lot of different things, so it's a really good process.
It just maybe just a personal comment on my side, from my side. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm very concerned always about the environment as well. And actually, the reason for me, I spoke about the reason, one of the two reasons why I actually went into biotech many years ago. I mean, one for me personally was that I really always wanted to help people. I always wanted to do something. I didn't want to go into the oil industry or anything else, or even computers, because I really wanted to do something that can save people's lives. That's one. The other reason is that biotechnology fundamentally is really the most gentle technology when it comes to the environment. So just as a general comment, it's not a refinery. We are not using. It's not even a chemical plant. We don't use solvent, organic solvents, or any of the things that could be dangerous to the environment. So just to point that out, for me, that was always an important part why I chose to go into biotech.
And maybe just kind of add on to that, it's very important. So when we think about the new facilities that we're designing, we're also following the U.S. Green Building Council design guides as we think about how those projects interface with the environment around them, as well as the people that have to work in them. That guides our decisions, impacting the environment, energy usage, indoor, environmental quality, all of that. So, as an engineer and being responsible for the built environment, it's important to me that it has as light a touch as possible. So.
Super. Next, I'm going to go, and Drew and Jennifer, I think if you could be prepared to help with this answer. We're going to go to a question from Scott, who asks, how do we measure the success of the current development plans? So were the goals and agreements with the city of Berkeley met? And so were our goals met, and what about the ones with the city of Berkeley?
So sorry for the background noise. So from a Bear standpoint, the agreement we signed in 1992, I'm stunned every time I read it about how appropriate it was, allowing us to develop the site as we needed to meet our patients' needs. So in my opinion, it's been very successful. And one of the things that's part of my job is, site development, and having the development rights well understood both by Bear and the city, allows for the predictability, so we could make sure that we could develop the infrastructure as needed to meet those patient needs. So from my perspective, and this is true with Bear, been very successful. Jennifer?
I think something that's important to note is that Bear is a global company, and so the Berkeley site competes with Bear sites all over the world. And when this site master plan was conceived, it was not a foregone conclusion that it would come to Berkeley. Part of the rationale that was explained to our top leadership is, one, the development agreement makes it easier for Drew to draw up a plan for how a building will go down or get built up, I should say, and have some level of confidence that we can meet the timeline. So the development agreement has been critical to build infrastructure and to attract investment that could have gone anywhere on the planet to this city. So that's one of the things that I think is really valuable. I would be uncomfortable to try and answer the question, has it been successful for the community? Because that's really up to the community to answer. What I can say is that I used to work for the city of Berkeley, and it was the level of community engagement that I saw at Bear that made me feel really comfortable about leaving a city of Berkeley job to go work for an organization that I felt really reflected my values.
Thanks, Jen. So next question is going to go back to Drew and Jessica again. It's from Tracy Ross, and Tracy's asking, can we address the kinds of sustainability measures that are planned? Are they reducing water use, efficient energy, solar panels, renewability? Can the site be 100% sustainable?
So maybe I can start. So for us to be power independent as a Berkeley site, technology doesn't necessarily allow it right now besides using carbon. However, that does not mean we will shy away from applying any technology that's available. So we have solar panels on site. Other forms of clean generation are always evaluated as part of our development. Bear as a company will be carbon neutral by 2030. Now that means we will make our operations as efficient as possible, and then there obviously will be some offsets required to get there. But when you think about the audacious goal of a company the size of Bear to go after that, that is a serious, I'll put it that way, a very serious commitment that I'm personally proud of. And I know it'll drive innovation, because the way you get technology to catch up is you make a market for it. And that's what we're doing. So.
Can I chime in on this one as well? We have reduced our water and energy use during the period of time that we've already been here. Because of Bear's commitments and because of the creativity, ingenuity of our people, I think we've dropped the amount of water or energy per unit of medicine by about 35%. And I can go look it up to make sure it's accurate. If you do a follow-up email, I can make sure you have the right numbers. And we're looking at employing new technology that will bring those numbers down even further. Before I joined Bear, a colleague who now, someone who worked for Bear told me a number one thing that we make in Bear is clean water, because our patients inject our medicine, and that needs to happen with water for injection, which is sterile water, which is not an easy thing to make. And anything we can do to reduce the amount of water in our process reduces the amount of energy as well.
Thanks.
Did I get that right, Drew? Did I correct me anywhere if I was wrong?
Well, I appreciate the numbers you put out there, and if you want to follow up on those, but that is exactly correct. Our biotech has advanced considerably in the last 30 years, and the processes that we develop are more efficient than they have been in the past. And we have been able to reduce our energy consumption per volume produced, and our water consumption drastically. So, and we see more of that to come, just the type of products that we plan to make. So, scientific advancements, technology advancements, and us understanding what the process is better, all allow us to be more efficient. So, and being efficient is good for everybody.
Great. Okay, going on, Jessica, there's a question from Tracy Ross about the planned pedestrian bridge over 7th. So Jennifer, you might want to see if you could bring that slide up. Is it practical given the amount of industrial traffic that throughway experiences, is the question.
Thanks for the question, Tracy. The parking structure proposed on the east side of 7th Street would be a very late part of the development, not anticipated probably until getting closer to that full 30-year build out. And ideally, we wouldn't even need to build it. We're taking transportation demand programs seriously and would really prefer not to allocate the space to parking, but wanting to reassure everyone that we do have the space to ensure all of our employees have adequate parking. The structure is incorporated into the plan, and due to the foot traffic, we wanted to include that as a potential option. because it is a busier street, and it could enable a safer crossing, and potentially be something available for the public as well, not just dedicated to Bayer employees. So.
And Jessica, if I could just add on to that, if we really put that many cars across the street, the impact on the 7th Street traffic would also be significant by getting that many people across the street multiple times a day. So an above grade crossing is obviously safer for our employees, but we see it as an improvement on 7th Street. But Jessica's point should be very well taken and considered, that will be the last thing that we build. Well, maybe not the last thing, but it will be deep into the thing, and only if we need it.
Thanks, Drew. Jennifer, could you also bring up the slide that shows the timeline for the process? So there was a question that Norm has raised about the EIR, when it's published, when they can comment. So can we go back over really quickly here when scoping is, what scoping is, when the draft is done, what the public comment period is, etc. Can you and Jessica walk through that?
So in the spring of 2021, we'll have the full EIR released. And so there'll be a period of public review, probably at least 45 days. So I know that's closer to the end of the process, but in the next month or so here with the upcoming ZAB meeting, I think the 11th of, I'll double check the date.
On the 12th, it's on the 12th of
Thank
November.
you.
And
Zoning
ZAB
Adjustments
stands
Board.
for, ladies,
Zoning
ZAB.
Adjustments Board.
Thank you. So
the Zoning Adjustments Board, and then I think on the 19th is the Planning
18th.
Commission, or 18th.
This is why I have it on my wall calendar. November 18th is what I show on my wall calendar in big red letters.
Okay. So both of those will be opportunities for scoping input to provide feedback about which studies need to be included in the environmental impact report.
Does that answer the question? Were there any other, there were several sub-questions in there as I remember too. You're muted.
I'm muted. When the public comment period is, I was trying to deal with a dog and cat fight in my home office. When the public comment period would be on that draft? Do we have that timing available as well? Or is that something we can provide in a follow-up?
Yeah, we'll provide in a follow-up. I don't want to give something wrong and guess. Oh, I see something, possibly spring 2021.
Right.
Right.
So 45-day period for the public to review and comment. So we're thinking late first quarter when everything would be ready for everybody to take a look at.
And Jessica, correct me if I'm wrong, but really the EIR and the EIR process are owned by the city, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so the city will publish, will conduct the scoping, which is seeking input as to what needs to be covered in the EIR process, in the EIR studies. They'll review all the work of the different types of consultants hired to produce the EIR. Then they'll publish that draft. They'll take comments on that draft, and then they will publish the final EIR.
Environmental Impact Report.
Thank you. Sorry, now I got into using acronyms.
Yes, it's independent experts perform the environmental impact report in the city's coordination.
So there's an anonymous question as well that's just about this public process, and I want us to tackle it because it might be something that's on the mind of other citizens as well. The question first and foremost is, when exactly is the city council voting, and can they block or hold up the development that Bayer proposes? And will Bayer be taking part in the political side of government? This seems like an opportunity for payola from Bear to politicians. So I'm going to take the last part of that on, and then Jennifer and Jessica, if you could talk to the first part. So in terms of Bear and what I perceive is a question around contributions to local elected officials. Particularly, I know this is on the minds of folks as we are in an election year. Bear does not provide funding or participate in the election process at the local level. We do not fund candidates. This is a community activity, and we respect the decisions of the community. So let's set the payola aside, and let's get to the real questions about when would the city council vote, and could they block or hold up the development? Jennifer?
All things are possible in this great big world. I think that's something that you would have to talk with your council members about. Really what happens is, from a process standpoint, our proposal for an extended development agreement will go first for a vote at the Planning Commission. And then once, if it is passed at the Planning Commission, then it will be taken up by the City Council. So it's really a question for how those representative bodies decide to vote. And if you have an opinion about how you think that vote should go, I'm a big fan of democracy. I think you should let your council member know your feelings.
Super.
And Kathy, maybe I just also want to be kind of clear on what we're doing here. So we're in the fortunate position, Bear, where we understand what our strategy is and what, from a development rights standpoint, we'd be looking for over the long term. And that allows us the opportunity to do an environmental impact study on that entire development at once. So the city and the community can see our total plans and we can assess it together holistically. It's a really nice opportunity. It also allows the city and the community to consider Bear and how that affects them and over the long term, over that same period. The alternative to this is doing this every single time we're going to build a building. And then when you do it that way, it's more incremental and no one ever really gets to look at it all together. So this is a really, it's beneficial to Bear, obviously, but we see it also as a big benefit to the community to be able to look at this holistically at one time and understand how we work together. So I just wanted that part to be clear.
And let me also just point out again, and I think I brought in the patient perspective a number of times, but that's what we do, right? I mean, basically everything we do, we really do ultimately to help patients. And when you look at drug development and how that works, with some of these medicines that we are working on, especially when we're going into cell and gene, we expect that a larger proportion of these new therapies are going to qualify for accelerated development because they're basically meeting a completely unmet medical need. I mean, they're really targeted towards patients that in many cases don't have any other option. And when you actually find something like this, you want to be able to get that to patients as quickly as possible. So to Drew's point, I mean, ultimately what that allows us then, when we talk about building a new building, a new manufacturing building, to basically gain time. Because we basically pulled the trigger, of course, on a major invest like a new manufacturing facility for cell therapy on our campus, only once we actually are at the point where we can see that this will allow us to really bring a really breakthrough therapy to patients. And then it's all about time. It's about really how to get this to patients as quickly as possible. So the development agreement really helps us to do that.
One of the things that's interesting about the development agreement is that the development rights that we're seeking in this agreement are actually less than what the underlying zoning would allow. So we're giving up some of our development rights on this 46 acres in order to streamline the process and increase the amount of open space on our site.
Thanks, everyone. Jennifer, do you want to go ahead and stop screen share?
Yes.
Couple last questions. We only have 2 left, so we might run just a couple minutes over, and but let's get to these. There's a question, and Jennifer, I'm going to throw this one at you. I don't know if you have these numbers at your fingertips. How many jobs was forecast by Bear in the current development agreement?
I know that one.
Oh,
I
awesome.
know this one.
Wonderful.
I think the forecast was for 1,600. So this is, we'll fact check this, and if there's a correction needed, we'll send it out. But my memory is that it was 1,600 jobs that would cover the portion of the property that is under the current development agreement. What we're seeking now is an encompassing agreement that covers the entire 46 acres. And so that number is adjusted upwards to really account for the full number of employees across the entire site.
Right, and I think the important thing to note here, and I think probably Jens or Drew could also speak to this, is as the technology evolves, the employment needs associated with technology may differ. So these are our best estimates always when we come into these things. It's sort of like being able to say what you're going to be doing yourselves personally 30 years from now. And who knew 30 years ago that there would be cell phones, for example.
And right, and I mean, one of the things that we are up against in what we do is that it's a very, very risky business. So at the end of the day, we have to really invest in developing multiple, actually up to 10 therapies in order to really get one that finally then works in all the clinical trials that we can get to patients. And that makes exact planning sometimes difficult, because even with the best possible science, human biology and medicine is a really complex thing. And while we believe that with these new technologies and these new therapies, we will get better and better. And also, one of our approaches has to be to invest in a broad pipeline of therapies, and that's what we want to do here. But still, it's you can compare it when you look at other industries that are as capital intensive as ours and have as long development cycles as ours. Like airplanes, right? And building airplanes is cost about the same maybe to develop a new jumbo jets than it costs to maybe develop one drug. However, imagine a situation if an airplane manufacturer would have to develop and build 10 different planes and then try them out in order to find one that flies. That's kind of the situation that we find ourselves in. So that's why exact planning is sometimes hard, but I'm very, very confident, because we are really investing in these platforms that allow us to really work on multiple therapies at the same time in parallel, that we will have some that will absolutely make it to patients and will help revolutionize care. And so therefore, I'm convinced that our planning figures are overall as good as it possibly can be, and we'll get there. We'll get there eventually.
Thanks,
and maybe just to add on to that ending product mix, those processes, some are simple to operate, some are complex to operate, some are simple to maintain, some are not simple to maintain. Some take a lot of raw materials, so warehouse, some take a lot of testing, so QC. And that the products that are successful will dictate the labor force. So it is truly an estimate, but it's of course it's an educated one.
Thank you. So one last question, and then Jens, I'm going to turn it over to you to wrap it up. But since there was only one left, I'd really like us to do it. Jennifer, if you could turn your microphone on. This is from Ricardo, who's waited patiently for an answer. how is this new project and Bear's commitment to stay 30 more years in Berkeley, how does that help address the homelessness in the community?
No pressure.
No pressure. You're what stands between them and the end of the meeting.
Yes. So homelessness is a really complex question, and I don't know that I'm qualified to answer it. And I don't know if the development agreement is a tool that is big enough to address it. However, if as a community that's something that people want Bear to focus on, that's a conversation to have with your elected leaders and with David White. We bring a lot of expertise about STEM education and science and engineering. Frankly, we don't have a lot of expertise in housing and social services. And if that is the area where there's the greatest interest, that's something to communicate to. That's what the political process is for, and that's what this negotiation will be about, is really learning what is most important to the community. Homelessness is a big, challenging problem. It's gotten so bad over the last 20 years, and if there was a wand that Bear could wave to solve it, I would advocate like crazy to make sure that we did that. I'm feeling it's a little bit more complicated, and I look forward to having the broader community discussion over the next year or so as we go through these negotiations.
Thanks, Jennifer. So with that, Jens, do you want to wrap it up? And then Jennifer, at the end, do you want to put your slide up to remind everybody how to get back to us and get engaged again?
Absolutely. Very good. Thank you, Cassie. And thank you all for participating here today. We really, I hope that you saw that we really want to be part of this community. We feel as part of the community. We want to keep being part of this community. We want to really bring the latest medical advances to patients really right here from Berkeley, just down the street from many of you. And today's discussion is really part of an ongoing conversation. So we hope you share at least some of our excitement about the future of medicine and what we could bring and continue to bring to the city. And we look forward to hearing from you and learning more about what your priorities are. So stay in touch. And I think we have this slide up in a second, which shows also then the various ways that you can stay in touch and continue to contact us. So email us, sign up for email updates about upcoming meetings and other opportunities to engage. So with that, thank you all very much, and stay safe in this pandemic. Just to point this out, we are probably just at the beginning of the second wave. And so I really encourage everyone, wear masks and stay safe out there. And let's keep in touch. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone, and have a great evening.
We'll leave the slide up for a little bit, and since it didn't go up for very long, there's a lot of information for people to copy down.